All right, you're ready to go.
Okay, good evening and welcome to our penultimate Neuroslimming webinar. Thank you again for all the great questions I received. A lot of them were actually around an interview I did on TV not long ago on sleep. So I've added sleep to the mix today. And if we don't get through everything, there is next month. So without further ado, I'm going to let Craig talk you through the logistics, my Chief Education Officer, and then we'll launch straight into it.
Thanks, Helena. Good evening, everyone. Nice to have you back again this month. Simple things to remember is just down the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a thing that says reactions. If you click on that reactions, you can either do a clap, a thumbs up, a heart, a laugh, and some celebration. So we can use those throughout the night if when Helena asks you for some feedback. So remember to do that. There is the chat function. If you've got any questions, feel free to type some things in there. We'll get to those throughout the night or at the end of the night. And the last thing to know is that there'll be plenty of questions being asked tonight, plenty tonight, in fact. And so get ready to throw your two bobs worth in, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, whether you know the answer, whether you don't know the answer. We'll see what you've got. All right, Helena, over to you.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, so tonight's overview, secrets to sensational sleep, genetic testing. Should you have a genetic test? You know, because there's a lot of direct to consumer, pay a few $100s and they will tell you what the perfect diet, exercise plan for you is, depending on your genes. Is it useful? Is it not? Can you really think yourself thin? Spoiler alert, yes, you can. High blood pressure, is it really a problem or a doctor's just making way too much of a fuss about it? And is cacao the new superfood? I'm going to give you another spoiler alert. It's good news about cacao as well. So it's a good news evening. Next week, we will continue with cacao because I just won't get time to get through it all. And there's really great studies around that. Keto is such a huge topic. I'm not going to cover it today, even though I was planning to. But I just think tonight's topics will lead really well into these four, which I've had questions about. NAFLD stands for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it could just be the disease you don't know you have because it's a silent one, but really important to know about. Okay, so let's just ask the first poll question. How much sleep does the average adult need? And there is, of course, a range because we're all unique, so is our need for sleep. Over to you, Craig. Okay, the correct answer, the majority has it, 7 to 9 hours per night. In fact, even 7 hours is not quite enough. Now, this will come as a surprise to people because the majority of, in fact, more than 50% of people don't regularly get even 7 hours a night. And if you don't, you're soon going to discover the potential hazards to your brain and body. So let's move on to the next question if you remove that. Okay, so there's no judgment here and we can't see who answers what. So just out of curiosity, so I can see a percentage, do you get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night? This is absolutely representative of the norm, you know, of society, that more than half of the population do not get that much sleep. Okay, what are the problems with that? Moving on, Craig. Okay, first question, this is another poll question. Can sleep deprivation cause type 2 diabetes? I mean, really? So more precisely, my question is just 7 consecutive days of insufficient sleep, which we now know is less than 7 hours, can push a person's blood sugar levels into the pre-diabetic range. Yes, it is absolutely true. They actually did a study on healthy young people with no hint of diabetes. This is type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is genetic. So it was just 7 days. They made them get less than 6 hours, six and a half hours sleep. Less than that, they would wake them up. They'd go through their day. And then after 7 days, they were all sent to so half the group got normal sleep and half the group, you know, were sleep deprived. Then they were all sent to the doctor to get their blood sugar levels tested. Now, the doctor didn't know that they were part of a study that was looking at the effects of sleep deprivation. And 100% of the people who didn't get at least 6.5 hours sleep a night, 100% of them, their blood sugar levels were in the pre-diabetic range, and the doctor said, oh, this person is in danger of having diabetes, unusual because they otherwise look healthy. So it is that important. Let's move on. I'm sure a question is going to be, will it rectify itself if you then do get good sleep? And the answer is yes. So one more question relating to the hazards of sleep. Is shift work a probable carcinogen? And the reason I've phrased it that way is because the World Health Organization classifies things as definite carcinogens or probable carcinogens. So is that true or false that the World Health Organization has actually classified shift work as a probable because they get irregular and very often inadequate disrupted sleep? Yes, it is true. And it particularly relates to breast cancer. These are the ones that seem to be most affected by sleep deprivation. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, and rectal cancer. And I'm just going to give you a heads up. Thank you, Craig. You can close that. When somebody comes to comes to see me, it doesn't matter what their symptoms or what their diagnosis, whether it's cancer, whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart disease, whether it's arthritis, whether it's an autoimmune condition, whether it's MS, whether it's cognitive decline, whether it's a mood disorder. The first thing I always ask them is, how much sleep are you getting? And 90% of them won't be getting regular, good quality and adequate sleep. And that is contributing to the illness. Let's move on. So it is really, really, really that important. So now I'm going to give you a list of things that insufficient sleep may influence. And you can select more than one. Can insufficient sleep increase the risk of any of the following? Okay, well, every single one of those, and great work, because a lot of them you've put 100%, 100% of you have said yes. The short answer is every single one of these conditions can be made worse or is contributed to by inadequate, insufficient, or poor quality sleep. Now, just a few words about those things. A lot of those conditions have what we call a bidirectional relationship with sleep. So once you have depression and anxiety, that actually contributes to poor sleep. If you have obesity, that often contributes to poor sleep. If you start to get cognitive decline, Alzheimer's disease, that actually disrupts your sleep. So it's a two-way street. So once you have one of these conditions, your sleep gets even worse and it becomes this really negative, vicious downward spiral. So it's really important to get on top of it sooner rather than later. Okay, one more, just an observation. This is a fascinating study looked at all over the world and found that daylight saving causes a spike in heart attacks and car accidents on that Monday, on that first day after daylight saving. And that's because people have lost 1 hour of sleep. And what it means is one of the reasons it contributes to heart attacks is it revs up what's known as our sympathetic nervous system, which just overactivates our heart, spikes our blood pressure. So we're much more likely to have any heart-related conditions, and we're drowsier, so we're much more likely to have car accidents. And it takes, so Monday there's there's a big spike, Tuesday a little bit less, Wednesday a little bit less, and it takes pretty much till the end of the week for us to get back to our baseline level of average heart attacks for a day. And the reverse is true when you stop daylight saving and you gain an hour of sleep. There are actually fewer car accidents and fewer heart attacks. Absolutely amazing. So the big question relating to us, Neuroslimming webinars, how does sleep loss drive up body fat? Let me count the ways. Firstly, sleep deprivation, the body responds, and remember, we're now talking a regular less than 7 hours sleep per night. The body responds as though it's in starvation mode. So if you're sleep deprived, you produce these 4 hormones that start with GELC, ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hormone that makes your stomach growl. So you're hungrier. So regardless of your best intentions, if you're sleep deprived, you will just feel hungry and want to eat more. E stands for endocannabinoids. That is one of the ingredients of marijuana. You know, the marijuana munchies. So people who are sleep deprived actually feel like snacking more, just like people who take regular marijuana. Leptin, L stands for leptin. That's the hormone that makes you feel satisfied, and that's the hormone that gives you energy. So even if you do eat, you just don't feel as full, because the hormone that makes you feel full is not being produced to the level it should. So you produce less leptin. And C stands for cortisol. So if you wake up sleep deprived, your levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, are higher than usual. Cortisol instructs your body to deposit fat around your abdomen. So, a lot of people think beer belly. A lot of the time that beer belly is actually a sleep deprivation belly, because cortisol tells your body to store fat around your abdomen, and cortisol also stimulates your appetite. So you don't stand a chance against these 4 hormones. Secondly, sleep deprivation lowers our willpower, and they've done loads of tests on people. They sleep deprive them, they snap much quicker. And really interestingly, it makes us more susceptible to food porn. In other words, when you walk into a food court and you see these big billboards or bus stops or on the sides of buses, and you see images of food, it stimulates your hunger more than it would if you'd had a proper night's sleep. Sleep deprivation also drives up cravings. It also makes us more moody, depressed. So we're more likely to engage in emotional eating. Because sleep deprivation also disrupts our gut flora, our gut microbiome, and we produce less of the really healthful bacteria, we actually don't absorb as many nutrients from the food as we usually would. So we're not even though we're eating more, we're actually absorbing less of the nutrients, but not fewer calories. Amazingly too, sleep deprivation reduces our peak muscle strength. And they've done tests on athletes where when they're sleep deprived, day one, they get a good night's sleep. How much can they lift in terms of weights? Then they give them a break. Then they give them a sleep deprived night, and they can't lift quite as heavy as they did when they had a full night's sleep. Sleep deprivation even affects our ability to perspire effectively. And if you're not perspiring properly, you can't run as fast because your body's not cooling down enough to help you get through that workout. So even if you think, I know that I have not had enough sleep, and I know that, I'm feeling tired, but I'm going to push myself to work out at the gym, well done. However, you're not going to burn as many calories because you simply can't, because of the way it's affected your biochemistry. The sleep deprivation has affected your biochemistry. And elite athletes have realized how important this is. And in fact, international soccer teams, cycling teams, they all actually have a sleep coach. And no, this is not somebody that rocks them to sleep and sings them lullabies and tucks them in. This is somebody who actually programs their sleep and makes sure that they get a good night's sleep, the right number of hours, the right quality, the right room, the right pillow, the right mattress. That's how important they realize that it actually is. And drum roll, this is the most depressing thing of all about sleep deprivation and your inability to shed excess body fat. Wait for this. That even if you exert all the willpower in the world, you know that the hunger hormones are up, but nonetheless, you exert superhuman willpower and you stick to a low-calorie diet. Guess what? You won't shed excess body fat. You will lose muscle mass. At least 70% of the weight you lose will be your precious muscle. And they've actually done comparative studies. The same diets, the same calories, the same exercise, the same everything. The sleep-deprived group will lose their fat, that won't lose body fat. They will lose muscle mass, which is the last thing that you want to do, because muscles keep you healthy, muscles keep you lean, and muscles keep your metabolic rate up. Okay, so now that we know it's not a good thing not to sleep enough, what helps us sleep better? Let's put up the next poll question. Which of the following, and once again, you could select more than one, which of the following helps people fall asleep more easily and quickly? Okay, well, 100%, great work. So yes, a hot bath or shower, and I'm going to go through all of these and explain why the answer is yes or no. So a hot bath or shower an hour before bed, why does this help us sleep? And in fact, a sauna is if you've got access to a sauna, who does? But if you ever have a sauna late at night, you'll notice how much better you sleep. So if you're ever in a hotel and get the opportunity, do it. Why? Because it's in fact a drop in body temperature in core body temperature that is required for us to fall asleep. And that's why a warm room does not help us sleep. If anything, a warm room will make it harder. So ideally, you want the room temperature to be no more than 19 degrees, less than 19 degrees Celsius. One little word of warning, though, don't let your feet get cold. If you've got cold feet, your core temperature will go up in order to try and keep your feet warm. If you've got cool feet, then your body temperature, if you've got cold feet, your body temperature will go up to warm your feet. But if you've got warm feet, your body temperature will stay down, if not lower, in order to cool your feet down. So that's just a little tip. Body needs to be cool, but not feet too cold. A cup of hot cocoa, no, for two reasons. Number one, you don't actually want a hot drink before bed because that will raise your body temperature. In fact, one of the reasons why we all like a cup, not all, but I think a lot of people love a hot drink in the morning, and they think they love their caffeine hit, they love their coffee, or they love their tea. It's not just the caffeine. It is actually the fact that we naturally need a rise in body temperature to be fully awake and alert. That sort of helps us get into our day. So a cup of hot drink at night is not a good idea. Lukewarm, fine, but who wants a lukewarm cup of anything? But anyway, not a hot drink at night because it will raise our core temperature. And cocoa, some people are very, very sensitive to caffeine. So even cocoa can give them enough caffeine so that they don't fall asleep well. Now, what's the story with caffeine? We will talk about it in a moment. A sugary snack, very good. And one of the reasons that sugary snack does not help us is, number one, you don't want to be digesting something too close to bed. But number two, digesting sugar can actually raise our body temperature more than, say, you had a handful of if you're really, really hungry, have a handful of walnuts or hazelnuts or a little bit of yogurt. So, but not something sugary, because protein does not raise your body temperature, but sugars can. So it's not even just the fact that, you know, your insulin's up and you're digesting. It's also the effect on body temperature. Now, the alcohol was a trick question, because alcohol is a sedative. So yes, it does help people fall asleep more quickly. However, in about 5 hours, there is a rebound arousal when you've metabolized the alcohol. So number one, a lot of people will wake up 4 or 5 hours later after alcohol and then not be able to fall asleep. And secondly, even if you do stay asleep, alcohol robs us of REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, or dream sleep. And they've done studies with people, and particularly alcoholics. When they go off alcohol, their brain binges on dreaming, because alcohol robs you of dreaming. And even people who'd say go on, you know, a week, they're sort of schoolies or whatever, when they go back to not drinking every night, they have a lot of catch-up dreams. And we need our deep sleep and our dream sleep, because both of them are equally important to our brain and body health. Yes, sex actually does help us fall asleep because of the cocktail of relaxing, feel-good chemicals that produces. So that's all good. Visualizing a pleasant scene or memory. Yes, very true. If you can't fall asleep, the best thing you can do is not count sheep. That is irritating and has never helped anybody. I don't know where that came from. Well, feeling bored, but it doesn't work. But if you visualize yourself walking along a beach or walking in nature or anything that makes you feel relaxed, it works. It's part of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is really, really effective. So that's a great thing. At least 10 minutes of natural light during the day. Yes, it really helps, particularly in the morning. You want at least 10 minutes of natural light every day, because it sets our biological rhythms. So we need light in the day, we need darkness at night. At least 10 minutes of exercise during the day. Absolutely. Look, preferably half an hour. But the point I want to make with this is even 10 minutes of exercise will help people sleep better. And once again, it's all about regulating our circadian rhythm. And an uncluttered bedroom is essential. Our bedroom and our bed has to be a sacred sleeping space. We have to train our brain that when we walk into that room, that is a room for sleep. Not a room for, thinking through problems, not a room for playing on our phone, checking email, reading work things. It's a room for sleep. So get rid of anything that's distracting. Now, a lot of people say that they like to read a book at night. that's fine, book in bed, as long as it's not work related, as long as it's not arousing, and as long as you don't read that book anywhere except bed. So you read other books outside of bed, but you've got your bed book and you've got your other book, because it's a way of training the brain to associate that book and that bed with sleep, if that's something that you like. Okay, and related to that, it's really important to have a wind down routine. We think if you've been running around, doing housework, doing work, checking email, and then you go, oh, right, now I've got to go to bed, bang, you're not going to fall asleep in 5 or 10 minutes. We all need a wind down routine, dimming that, whatever makes you feel relaxed and calm. So for some people, it might be a few yoga stretches. I definitely don't do vigorous exercise within 2-3 hours of sleep, but certainly, some relaxing yoga or stretches for a very short period of time, meditation, lighting a few candles, playing some soft music, writing down what you're grateful for, cuddling with your partner, whatever makes you feel like, yes, I'm winding down. That is really, really important. And that hot bath can be part of it. Thank you, Craig. Yes. All right. So the next question relates to coffee. I think you're probably all aware that the way we metabolize coffee is genetic. So some people are fast metabolizers, and they have a version of an enzyme in their liver that helps them break down coffee quickly. So they don't get that real buzz. And, some people maybe can go to bed and fall asleep and, can have their cup of coffee with dinner, not decaf, and fall asleep, and others can't. So is that true or false, that you really can have that cup of coffee before bed and still get a good night's sleep? Let's put that one up. Okay, this is again a trick question, because yes, some people can have a cup of coffee with dinner and still fall asleep easily because they metabolize it quickly. However, it still disrupts when you have a polysomnography, i.e. you're attached to a machine that can record your brain activity, the electrical activity of your brain while you sleep. If you've had a cup of coffee, soon before going to sleep, you will not quite get as good quality sleep. You will not get quite into those really deep levels of sleep that we need. So even if you're a fast metabolizer, I would still recommend not having caffeine. If you're a fast metabolizer, not after 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And if you're an average metabolizer, not to have caffeine after 1 or at the latest 2 in the afternoon, because it's going to affect your sleep even if you're not aware of it. Okay, moving on. Now, a lot of people like to still, check their mobile phones or read on a iPad, and we know, media tells us that blue light is most disruptive. So, do blue light filters help you fall asleep even if you're on a device? Or night modes, that make the light look warmer. Okay. Unfortunately, they've actually put this to the test, and the answer is blue light filters don't actually help people fall asleep any quicker than not having blue light filters. I have one because I hadn't known about this before this study, but let me tell you about it. You can, shut that down. They've got a group of people, young, healthy people. 1/3 of them were allowed to play with their mobile phones an hour before bed, no blue light filters, just normal. Group number 2 played on their mobile phone for an hour, within an hour of sleep, with a blue light filter or some kind of night mode. And group number 3, no mobile phones for an hour before bed. And then they looked to see how long it took everyone to fall asleep. And unfortunately, the 2 phone groups took equally long to fall asleep. It's not just blue light. Number 1, any bright lights lower our production of melatonin, which is the hormone that kicks off all the bodily processes that prepare our brain and body for sleep. And secondly, the biggest influence in terms of phones or tablets is the stimulation. Because if you're on a phone, it is stimulating. Even if you're thinking you're doing something relaxing, it is still arousing, regardless of what you're doing. So it's not just the light from the device, it's the stimulation and the arousal that keeps us awake. So they're really, really bad news an hour before sleep. Okay. So because sleep is so important, do sleeping pills help? In other words, is it better to just take a bit of a sleeping pill every so often rather than just lying in bed and tossing and turning all night for hours? Okay. False is the correct answer. And I'll tell you why. Once again, it's about the quality of sleep. And this is such an important point that, in fact, the Australian Sleep Association, the American Sleep Association, the European Sleep Association, this is, run by doctors and scientists, stipulate that a doctor is not allowed to prescribe sleeping pills if somebody can't sleep until they have exhausted all lifestyle interventions, like all the things I mentioned, a dark room, not using caffeine, not using nicotine, not using alcohol, the wind down routine, the whole bit. And if it's really bad, it's called CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. They have to prescribe that first before they resort to sleeping pills. And 99% of the time, you don't need sleeping pills if you address all these other things. Or it might be addressing the depression or whatever it is that is keeping the person awake. Because let me ask you this question. Do sleeping pills help? Is the same as asking, would whacking you across the head with a cricket bat help you get a good night's sleep? Whacking you across the head will render you unconscious. That is a different state of your brain than being asleep. And that is what sleeping pills do. They render you unconscious, but they don't give you any of the benefits of sleep on your brain. Yes, your body might get a bit of rest, but unfortunately, you don't get all those other heart healthy benefits, brain healthy benefits. And the other problem with sleeping pills is they are all highly, highly addictive. And long-term use of sleeping pills can actually increase the risk of dementia, cognitive decline, Alzheimer's disease. Okay, what about OTC, over-the-counter pill, sleeping aids? Are they any better? Are they any more helpful? Or at least are they safer? Very evenly split. And in fact, it's a very nuanced answer. They're probably safer, but that's also probably because they don't really help. A lot of it is placebo. Yes, some studies have found that valerian may be helpful. But here's the thing, over-the-counter anything, supplements, are not regulated by the Therapeutic Goods Administration, nor the FDA in America. So it's the TGA in Australia, the FDA in America. They don't regulate things that are over the counter. They just don't. So you don't actually know what you're getting. And studies have been done on supplements where they just randomly pick them out. Number one, they don't always contain what they say they contain. They don't always contain it in the doses that they contain. And there's often very, very little to support that they are helpful. So I personally wouldn't waste my money unless you've actually found something that seems herbal and doesn't seem to be affecting you negatively. But I just wouldn't, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how these things are affecting us. So I would steer clear of most things. Okay. Finally, I always get this question, is melatonin a safe option? Remember, melatonin is a hormone produced by the pineal gland, a tiny little gland in our brain, to signal that it's time to signal our brain and body that it's time to get ready to sleep. And you can get it on prescription, and you can also get it over the counter. Is melatonin at least the safest non-addictive sleep aid? Very interesting. Used in the right way for the right amount of time by the right person, melatonin is okay. But here's the caveat. Remember what melatonin is. It regulates our sleep-wake cycle. So we start to produce it in the evening, and we do not produce it once it gets light. Melatonin does respond. It follows its own rhythm, but it also responds to light. Now, where melatonin has been found to be useful is in treating jet lag, in order to help us switch over to the new time zone more quickly. And so it would only be used for a couple of days, and you'd use it maybe 45 minutes, an hour max before you want to go to sleep. And so it will help you initiate sleep. But melatonin is not for use for insomniacs, because melatonin doesn't trigger sleep. There's a difference. It triggers the processes that get you ready for sleep. So if you wake up at 2 o'clock and can't fall back to sleep and you think, oh, take some melatonin, it's the worst thing you can do, because you've just reset your body clock to think that 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. is the time to get ready for sleep, and you're going to be drowsy through the day. It's still not going to help you fall asleep quickly. The second thing so melatonin, really, so far, the studies have only found a use in jet lag, or the second group is only over 55-year-olds. If you're under 55, do not use it, because it'll disrupt your own melatonin production. We don't know this for sure, but there are some studies that suggest it. Then if you start taking melatonin, your brain's going to go, well, I don't need to produce it because it's coming in from another source. You definitely don't ever want that to happen. Now, the reason it might be okay for over 55-year-olds, because sort of towards the age of 60 and beyond, we're not as good as producing melatonin. So people will find you don't produce as much when you need it, and you don't switch it off as well when you don't need it. So this is why older people might say, I'm more sleepy during the day, but I still don't find it easy. I still can't fall asleep at night. And that's because melatonin should, I don't know if you can see, should rise rapidly in the evening and then sort of decline slowly through the night and be, stay low throughout the day and then rise again in the early evening. But in an older person, there's less of a rise and less of a drop, less of a rise, less of a drop. So you don't get that sharp feeling of wakefulness or really deep feeling of sleep. So in an older person where it's really disruptive, it may help to give them some little bit of top-up melatonin of an evening just to help them get a better night's sleep. And you actually want them to switch off their melatonin in the morning so they feel more aroused during the day. So they're the only times. Jet lag for a couple of days, and over the age of 60, if it's really, really finding it hard to go to sleep. Okay. Are there any questions about sleep? And I'm going to have to rely, that's my key message is this: the shorter your sleep, the shorter your life, because there is not one single system in your body that is not negatively affected if you get less than 7.25 hours of sleep every night. Now, you might err on the side of you can just get away with 7.25 hours, but most people actually need 8. And because we've never given ourselves an opportunity, we think we can get by, but we're kidding ourselves. We don't know what we're missing out on. Why are people tired all the time? Why have they got so many aches and pains? Why have we got so many mood disorders? Why aren't people on top of their game? Why can't I resist cravings? The answer to most of those, to just about all of those questions is you're probably not getting enough sleep. So we are just underperforming in every area of our lives. And I mean, this is a, weight management slimming webinar. And the reason I've made such a big deal about sleep is don't bother to try and manipulate your food and your exercise until you get your sleep in order. That is by far and away the most important. Now, of course, it's a two-way street. If you eat better, if you get more fresh fruit and vegetables, if you get that exercise, you will sleep better. But I still think, no, I don't think sleep comes first. Don't bother going on a diet.
Couple of questions for you.
Yep. If you don't get a good one. Yeah.
What about waking up every 2 hours? Obviously, that's not good because it's broken sleep.
Do you, look, most of us, I would get up probably an average of twice a night just to go to the bathroom and come back, and I will fall asleep within seconds.
Okay, cool.
So as long as you fall, it's actually normal to wake up. There might be a noise or a wind or your partner knocks you or something. If you wake up for a couple of minutes a few times throughout the night, that isn't a problem.
Right. Cool.
How long? An hour or two, you really don't. Yeah.
How long before bed can you have a hot drink? Is an hour before okay?
I would say 90 minutes.
Okay. We're talking about the devices. The Kindle's the same, I believe. it still has a light, and obviously it's generating some kind of excitement or engagement from it. So Kindles are not that good.
They're not that good because you're still getting way more light than is ever natural at that time of day. That's why I say, look, use your Kindle on the bus, on the train, during the day, but just have that one book dedicated to the bedroom.
Does guided meditation with binaural background notes send one to sleep? It helps me about 80% of the time.
Yes, it certainly can, but make sure that you put it on a timer and you don't have it going all night. Because yes, the short answer is yes, it helps, but you don't want to fall asleep and have it continue on, because it stops you getting into really deep sleep if you've got some kind of background noise like that.
Last question. How can you change falling asleep in the lounge chair and then you go to bed and you're wide awake? Don't fall asleep in the lounge chair.
Okay. That is a very common thing. Now, I don't know who's asking the question. That is a very typical thing for an over 70-year-old or even over 65, because you're not producing enough melatonin. It may be related to a high carbohydrate meal, late lunch. It's about sometimes, there's nothing wrong with naps, but if they do stop you sleeping, then you want to stop yourself having that nap. So to try and stop that happening, try and schedule some exercise during that time. Go for a walk, put on some music, have a dance. Try and do something arousing at that time if you can. But this may also be something that you might want to do cognitive behavioral therapy for, and you might want to Google sleepschool.org. It's an English, British organisation, UK-based organisation, and they have an app with online courses that help deal with a whole lot of different sleep issues. You may find something useful there. The reason I recommend them is they're cheaper than the Australian equivalents.
We spoke about melatonin. Is it a good option for sleep for workers that only work 2 night shifts out of 4 days working cycle? So it's this shift work piece.
I think that might, I don't.
Interesting.
I think that could be I would experiment. Okay. I'd experiment with that one. That might be a really good use, because it's a bit like frequent jet lag.
Yeah. And is it 1 or 2 hours before bed to start winding down, reducing stimulants to get to sleep and stay asleep?
It depends on the person. 1 hour should be fine.
Can a siesta make up for less than 7 hours at night?
A siesta is better than nothing. Yes, if you're getting less than 7 hours per night, I'm all for the siesta, if that's the best you can do. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention about melatonin. The other thing about melatonin is, if you get an over-the-counter, they range in dose from like 0.3 of a milligram to 10 milligrams. Whatever you do, don't ever take anything so high, just half a milligram. But the problem, they've also tested melatonin, and different companies, even if they say there's half a milligram or 1 milligram, sometimes there's 4 times more than they say, and sometimes there's 8 times less than they say. And it's just because it's hard to get the dose right. So I'd prefer you get a prescription melatonin, because you're more likely to get the right dose. So I'm just saying, if you're buying it over the counter, get the lowest dose, because you don't want to be overdosing. But even the one company, sometimes different batches have slightly different amounts. It's just a hard drug to get the right dose.
All right, there's a question about the long haul flight, but you mentioned that around melatonin being a good option for that. So let's move on to genes.
Okay. So, poll question: can genes influence our response to food and drugs? True. The trues have it, that is correct. And there's actually a whole science around it, and it's called nutrigenetics. The way your genetics influences your response to different foods. So, and this goes for even things like glycemic index. They found that some people can eat a piece of bread, their blood sugar spikes. Other people eat the same piece of bread and their blood sugar doesn't spike. Some people can eat a piece of chocolate, their blood sugar spikes. Other people eat some chocolate and their blood sugar doesn't spike. So that's just an example, but yeah, we have very individual responses to a whole range of different foods. So that's true. It's called nutrigenetics. And same with drugs. That's why quite often, you know, if you're on a very specific, say, chemotherapy, they will test your genes to see if you're on the right dose and exactly the right type of drug. Okay, next. Now, this is the reverse question. I've said, yes, your genes can influence your response to food. Does it work in reverse? Can food influence our genes? This word expression, by the way, means what we eat can influence whether genes are turned on or turned off, or to what degree. And the answer, once again, is true, that foods can influence perhaps, you know, which proteins that a gene will direct certain cells to produce. Broccolis are particularly good. You know, all your cruciferous vegetables are particularly good in getting you to turn on proteins that help fight cancer cells. That's why broccoli is one of these things that is found to have anti-cancer properties. And that is called nutrigenomics. That's another study. Okay, moving on. What about exercise? Can exercise influence the expression of our genes? True, it can. Particularly, they found exercise can turn on genes that lower inflammation throughout the body. And the message here is, and this is known as epigenetics. Epigenetics doesn't just refer to exercise influencing our genes, but a whole lot of environmental factors can influence the expression of our genes, but particularly in relation to exercise. We forget that exercise isn't just about moving our muscles. Exercise is like, you know, those old-fashioned pinball machines. It's like setting off this ball, and it just has a knock-on effect to so many different processes in our body and in our brain. So yes, physical exercise reduces inflammation through its effect on genes. How good is that? So moving on from there, therefore, is genetic testing a good idea? Then why shouldn't we get a genetic test? And there's a lot of direct-to-consumer genetic testing. Is it useful for guiding an individual's food and exercise choices? Okay, in theory, yes. In practice, you're probably going to get as accurate advice from your horoscope. I'm sorry. Moving on, and let me explain why. So what are the problems with direct-to-consumer genetic testing? Firstly, they take your saliva. That's pretty good, but blood is more accurate because saliva can also be contaminated with bacterial genes. We've got hundreds, probably 500 different bacteria in our mouths. So some of their genetic material can obscure the picture. The reason I've got that woof there is a prankster once sent their dog's saliva to one of these companies, and they failed to recognize that it was a dog's genes. So their accuracy is a little bit dubious. When they sort of do big tests on the results, they're about 40%, up to 40% false positives. In other words, they tell you that you've got a particular characteristic based on your genes, and they're wrong. You don't. The other problem is they don't look at your entire genome. They don't look at all your 20,000 plus genes. They take sort of snapshots, snapshot here, snapshot there, areas that they know have interesting genes in them, and then they extrapolate by comparing to what other people with those similar genes have. So it's a bit of a extrapolation game, really. The other reason why genetic testing, direct-to-consumer genetic testing, is not helpful is because genes do not act in isolation. So even if they find a gene that influences how you metabolize a particular food, that gene interacts with all these other genes that also influence how you metabolize that particular food. So it's never just one. So for instance, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of genes which all influence our propensity to shed body fat or more easily gain body fat. And everybody's got a mixture of these genes. So you might have 10 genes that predispose to more easy weight loss, but then another 15 genes that don't make it so easy to lose weight. So it's all a really mixed bag. And the final thing is that I've had patients come to me getting answers they didn't know they were going to get, and in absolute tears because it was information they didn't want to know. ApoE4 is a good example. ApoE there are different versions of this gene, and a particular version of this gene called ApoE4 increases your risk of Alzheimer's. It's not that you'll definitely get Alzheimer's, but it may double or quadruple your risk of Alzheimer's, depending on whether you have 1 or 2 copies of this gene. Well, this woman gets these results back and just sort of goes through, oh yeah, I've got, yeah, they're right, red hair, whatever, ApoE4, increased risk of Alzheimer's. She was like, what? I didn't know that I was going to learn that, and I didn't want to know anyway. So be very, very careful, because you may learn things that you didn't actually want to know. Okay. And the other thing, I didn't mean to go that fast. The other thing I find laughable is the advice that I have read a lot of these that patients have brought in because they haven't known how to interpret certain things. But the bottom line is, this is the advice they get. All of them, some version of this. Get 7 to 9 hours sleep a night. Who would have guessed? Get regular aerobic exercise. Who would have guessed? Do strength training. Eat more vegetables. Eat less sugar. You don't need a genetic test to tell you that. So unfortunately, even though we might get to a stage where we have much more accurate genetic testing, right now, it's a bit of fun and games. I personally wouldn't waste my money. Okay, I've gone over time. So I guess shall I run through and finish in the next 5 minutes, or shall I save it for next week? Shall we go for another 5 minutes and just sort of to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so can you think yourself thin? Spoiler alert, you can. And let me just give you a couple of examples. There was an amazing study called the counterclockwise study, where they got people all between the ages of 70 and 90. They tested their heart rate, their blood pressure, their posture, the speed at which they walk, their strength, their balance, everything. And then for 7 days, they took them to a country house and they had decked it out the way everything was as it was 20 years ago. And they said, one rule, you can only talk about what happened and what you were doing 20 years ago. And so there was no mobile phones, and all the newspapers were from that time. And, physios came in and made them play games and said, come on, you used to be able to play tennis and this, that, and the other. And then, we can't do it. But, they played along. And they really started to put themselves into the mindset of being 20 years younger. 7 days later, they retested their heart rate, blood pressure, their eyesight, I forgot to tell you, their grip strength, their speed of gait. They could not believe that everybody had improved and their physiology was younger after 7 days of just thinking about being younger. The same thing has happened in terms of muscle strength. Dozens of studies have been done now, but one of the most recent ones, they got a group of people, and nothing wrong with them, but they put their arms in a plaster for 4 weeks. And group number 1 just had to go about their normal life and they couldn't use their arm. Well, nobody could use their arm. Group number 2 were told for 10 minutes a day, you have to visualize yourself using that arm and lifting heavy weights. And after 4 weeks, they took the cast off. All of them had some muscle wasting, as you do. But when they tested their strength, those who had been visualizing lost 50% less strength than those that had not been visualizing. Because when we visualize our muscles carrying out exercises, we are electrically stimulating those muscles. And so they maintain some of their strength. And if you're in fact also using them, then they found that you will increase your strength just by visualizing. How does this translate to fat loss? If you visualize yourself being slim, you see that yourself wearing the clothes that you want to wear, see yourself running up the stairs instead of dragging yourself up the stairs, visualize yourself doing all those things that you want to be doing, but carrying excess body fat is making it hard. What you're doing is your brain is now going, okay, well, for that to happen, I need to have a faster metabolic rate to get rid of this fat around my waist. I need to have stronger muscles. I need to have greater flexibility. And your brain will start to send the signals to all the parts of your body to work more efficiently and to bring you closer to that slimming goal. Now, it would help if you also took some steps to bring you to a healthier place, but just visualizing it will actually you will unconsciously start to do the things that increase your metabolic rate. You'll just unconsciously feel you have more energy. You'll actually feel your cravings go down because your brain will go, eating sugar is not compatible with this visualization. And it will shut down all those things that drive you away from that goal. It is that powerful, but we just don't trust it because we don't get instant results. Don't underestimate these two things, sleep and visualization. Hey, you could combine the two, visualize yourself feeling slim, at the end of the day. Okay, very quickly, let's just finish off with blood pressure because I promised. So what is the upper limit of healthy blood pressure? Okay. All right, I can tell you why the 140 on 90 and the 120 on 80 both got a lot of votes. And that's because usually the correct answer is what's considered the upper limit of healthy is really 120 on 80. However, the doctor won't prescribe medication until it hits about 140 on 90. And in that window, they will suggest lifestyle changes. So really and truly, you prefer it to be closer to 120 on 80. Obviously, we're different genetically, but yeah, okay. So what is blood pressure? Let's just explain that. Blood pressure is the pressure that is exerted on your arteries as your heart pumps. So your heart pumps and relaxes. There's two numbers. The upper number is called systolic. That's the higher number. And it is the pressure against your artery walls when your heart pumps the blood out through your arteries. And the diastolic pressure, which is the number underneath, is the pressure inside your arteries when your arteries relax back down. So systolic, diastolic. That's what blood pressure is. Thought we better explain that. So is high blood pressure really that unhealthy? Like, what's the big deal? Actually, it is. Because it can, think about this. High blood pressure is a lot. Remember our talk about cholesterol. High blood pressure is putting a lot of pressure on your artery walls, and it starts to damage the inside of your artery walls, which means your artery walls are more likely to have cholesterol sticking to them and having plaques and calcium buildup, which means you're more likely to have heart disease or stroke. So it really is a big deal. However, there's going to be a caveat. So if we move on, Craig, close that. Before I sort of get into the solution, one more poll question. Hypertension can cause which of the following? The answer is all of the above. It can cause heart attack and stroke. Now, the reason it can cause all of the above is because it is damaging blood vessels everywhere. So it can cause, it is a risk factor for particularly vascular dementia because it is damaging blood vessels in the brain. And the really little blood vessels, it can actually cause, micro bleeds. The kidneys are particularly sensitive to high blood pressure. It can definitely cause kidney damage. Vision loss, it can damage the arteries in your eyes, and it can actually cause vision loss. Erectile dysfunction is another potential problem with high blood pressure because you're damaging the vessels inside the penis. So that's why all those things may result from consistently high blood pressure. It's just think high blood pressure, it is damaging those artery walls. Now, the worst case scenario is having a heart attack or stroke, but it can also damage smaller blood vessels in the brain, in the eyes, in the kidneys, in the penis. Okay. Now, here's my big caveat and my big gripe. Hypertension is not a diagnosis, it's a symptom. Now, doctors will kind of talk about hypertension as though it's a disease. It's not. It's a sign that's what's causing it. Blood pressure doesn't just rise for no reason. Yes, there are some rare diseases that can cause high blood pressure. You'll get tests to rule that out. But most of the time, high blood pressure is an opportunity to address what's going wrong. What can you improve? There's something that is causing high blood pressure. So my approach is you treat the cause, not the number. I very, very rarely need to give somebody tablets to lower their blood pressure because there are so many things we can do to lower blood pressure. So let's look at what they might be. What lowers blood pressure? Okay, let me give you the good news first. The good news is that every single one of those, including the 100 grams of dark chocolate per week, has been found to lower blood pressure. Okay, so they all work, but the one that's most effective is, you are correct, is get regular good quality sleep. So that is the best way. But they're all good, and you've done very well. As for the rest, shedding excess body fat, learning to meditate, and eating less sugar, those three would be the second. Regular exercise. Those are eat less sugar, shed excess body fat, get regular exercise, learn to meditate. Those four would be probably an equal number two. It depends on the person. So for some people, they might not need to shed excess body fat, but they're sitting all day. So that then look at getting regular exercise, or maybe you're getting the exercise, you're not carrying excess body fat, but you're stressed and deadlines and your whole world is just one big stress bomb. Then maybe learning to meditate is the one for you. So can you see why there's a whole lot of things we can do? I want to clear up the discrepancy between salt and sugar. Firstly, excess sugar is a far greater risk factor for high blood pressure than is excess salt. And that's because when your liver is breaking down fructose, which is one of the most common sugars in all your packaged foods, it produces a byproduct called uric acid, which raises blood pressure. So excess sugar is a much greater cause of high blood pressure than excess salt. Now, you're going to find this amazing. I don't know I get medical students coming through the practice all the time. None of them, when I ask them this question, none of them get it right. They all say, eat less salt as the number one. It's just so outdated, it blows my mind. And none of them say eat less sugar, and none of them say get better sleep. So your doctor may not discuss the sugar and the sleep, but you know that that's important. With the excess salt, if you're not eating packaged food or junk food or fast food, you probably don't have to worry about it. If you love your salt on food, then just drink a whole lot more water, because it's not the salt, it's increasing the concentration of sodium in your blood. It's a concentration thing. It's not an absolute thing. So if you want to get the concentration of sodium down in your blood, you just drink more water. Eat more salt, drink more water. That's just the price you pay. And it's not a bad price. Now, I'm not going to go into why dark chocolate helps. It's just going to be a teaser for next week. Final question is, when you go to the doctor, there's another poll question, and they test your blood pressure, they check your blood pressure. Do they check both arms? Has your doctor ever taken your blood pressure in both arms at the same visit? Okay. Next time you go to that's disappointing that only 13% of you have had both arms checked. The reason being, if there is more than doctors aren't in agreement with the cutoff. If there's more than a 20 millimeter of mercury. So if your systolic blood pressure in one arm is 120 over 70, but in the other arm is 140 over 70, 80, that's a problem. A 20 millimeter of mercury difference is a problem. 15 is a bit of a problem. 10 maybe is a problem. Under 10 is fine. It's a sign that something's going on, because you should have equal pressure everywhere. So if one side, and it doesn't matter which side, has a much higher pressure, that means that one side has some damage or stiffening or calcification going on, and you need to get that checked out. It's not common, but if it's there, you need to get it checked out. So next time you go to the doctor, please ask them to check both arms, and ask them, is it 10, 20? Is the difference great or small? And if it's great, you need to have it investigated. But you only need to have that tested, in both arms, once a year, once every couple of years. It doesn't have to be every single visit. Okay. And finally, has your doctor ever discussed your pulse pressure? And your pulse pressure is simply the difference between the systolic and diastolic. So if you've got perfectly good blood pressure, 120 on 80, the difference is 40. That's normal. But if there's a great difference, once again, what it means is your arteries must be stiff if your systolic is that much bigger than your diastolic. So once again, it's a hint that something may be going on. So they're the three numbers you need: blood pressure in one arm, difference in blood pressure of both arms, and the difference between systolic and diastolic. They're three clues. It's just the more information you have, the better you know whether you have any risk of heart disease. And since it's the biggest killer in men and women in all Western countries, then it's an important thing to be aware of. Okay. So I will leave cacao for next time, and it's going to be a really fun discussion because it's going to be all good news. But cacao is not the same as chocolate. Just keep that in mind. And as usual, I will ask more questions. I will open it up to questions, but just so I get some feedback. How did you find this webinar? Did you find the information useful? Excellent. Thank you very much. You have made my night. And I'm sorry I went over time, but I just want to share so much with you because I just think the more empowered you are, the healthier you are. So just as a reminder, see you on the 2nd of June. We will have one in June, and that is our finale. That's 12 months, 12 of them, with all the breaks. I've still made sure you've gotten 12, and then I'll tell you what's in store after we finish our 12 webinars. So I really look forward to seeing you next month. Send me on all your finale questions. As I said, we will cover cacao, ketones, NAFLD, non-alcoholic liver disease, and type 2 diabetes, questions around those things. And in the meantime, are there any more questions?
There's no extra questions. We're all good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for staying. I really appreciate it. Apologies for going over time, but I really thank you for staying. Love to have your company.
Thanks, Helena.